welcome you all. This is the May Network Meeting 2026, and our topic today is navigating financial aid appeals and more things probably too, because you'll probably learn a lot in this space because we have our two favorite people, our two favorite financial aid experts in the house today. It's always exciting when we get to work with partners who really understand and care of this work. So first, I want to introduce to you Isaiah Ellis. Isaiah is a co-founder and managing partner of Navicor Partners, and also the creator of Me, or is it MI? Isaiah, you'll have to correct me when you come up. It's a culturally responsible, multilingual AI assistant that helps students and families and professionals navigate the college and career and financial aid decisions. So he currently serves as the assistant director of the Office of Financial Aid at University of Maryland, College Park. And then previously he was a part of the outreach team and leadership, and also held leadership roles with the U.S. Department of Education, Federal Student Aid, the Maryland Higher Ed Commission, and McDaniel College. So that is Isaiah Ellis. We love having Isaiah with us. His partner, I won't say in crime, but partner, Fred Stinnes, comes back to us again. He is also a co-founder and managing partner of Navicor Partners. Fred has been a forward-thinking educational consultant, and has previously served for more than a decade with the U.S. Department of Education, Federal Student Aid. And Fred also has extensive experience because he's been the director of offices of financial aid. So we're not presenting people who just got here. These folks have been in the trenches of doing this work and have a long, long history of success. They come to us whenever we call on them. Sometimes I just have to text them with a random, crazy financial aid request and question, and they answer. And we appreciate that. Now, you can't be texting them all the time like I do. You need special privileges to do that. But without further ado, I bring you Isaiah Ellis and Fred Stinnes, and we're going to highlight them. Thank you, guys. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Candice. And we're going to begin today's presentation, and Isaiah is going to get us started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you all can get a whip of what we'll be discussing today. Let me know, thumbs up. Can everybody see the presentation?
It's coming.
Okay.
Yep. We see your screen now.
So you got it? Okay.
Yep, you can
all right.
Go to screen mode if you want.
It's loading. Okay. With that said,
while that's loading, I'm glad she said we can text us anytime. You know, we come from a long way when we had to pay per text.
Yeah.
For my 9 p.m. friends.
Okay. You're good to go.
Okay. Isaiah, why don't you go ahead and get us started today, introduce today's topic.
Absolutely. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here today to talk about this important topic. A lot of the students that we do serve are highly needed students. We recognize they need a little bit more care, they need a little bit more paperwork, and this can make the difference between them attending a higher ed institution or even pursuing post-secondary or post opportunities that exist for them, whether they're going to a community college, four-year institution, trade school, vocational school. This is important to help make sure that they are continuing on and they don't drop off. A lot of these students also lose the care of the high schools. So a lot of the work that you all are doing, we are very much appreciative of. It is a collaborative effort. It's not one person is doing everything. So the information that we're going to provide for you today is to make sure that you are equipped with all the information that you need to make the best assistance or the best service to the students and their families. Next slide. So we're going to cover about several different topics as it relates to the agenda. One, we're going to cover the what it means to complete a FAFSA form. We're not going to get into the weeds of completing the FAFSA form. We're just going to highlight what it means and why it's important in regards to special and unique circumstances. We're going to cover FERPA. That is vital, especially for this population, especially for the families that are looking to get information, because the student is considered independent of the family once they leave high school, and is their account, everything surrounding the student themselves. So even when you're trying to assist, if you're a novice in the area, just within your first 2 years, it's very important that you understand the FERPA and how it pertains to the student as well. We're also going to cover special financial unusual circumstances. We'll get into that. PJ, which is also professional judgment. Whenever you hear those acronyms, that's what that means. And then we'll get into some of the scholarship. And one of our favorite parts are the scenarios where we're going to go visit different type of things and tell you how and teach you how to navigate those important circumstances. So what defines a complete FAFSA submission? That's when a student is going through the process. They're going to studentaid.gov. They go inside the website. They enter the information upper right-hand corner in the person icon, and they complete a successful FAFSA completion. Now, there are three main components of it. The contributor, which is the student. If they're independent, there's only going to be the student. If they need a contributor information, then they're going to add a contributor information. There are several different circumstances that exist, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation, where the student, if they are considered a dependent student, they can complete the FAFSA form without having the contributor information attached to it. We'll get into those circumstances a little bit later on. Now, as they're completing it as well, if they indicated that they serve if they're going to be considered dependent, such as they are going in the military, such as they have a dependent, things like that, they can be placed in a provisional status, especially if they indicated on the FAFSA form that they have a unique circumstance and they answer the questions on the FAFSA form itself. They will be placed into what's called a provisional status, meaning that they will have to supply documentation to prove before they can be converted they can finalize their dependency. We'll get into that a little bit later on and what that means and how that looks. But when completing a FAFSA form, they have to complete these several different steps in order to successfully have it submitted to federal student aid and then be able to reach the students that they indicated on the FAFSA form itself. Now, also part of the successful submission is also requiring consent that allows the IRS to import information onto the FAFSA form. Now, a lot during these presentations, you're going to hear me say FAFSA form. Now, the institution has what's called an ISAR. They are the same thing, but ISARs are the institutional records. The FAFSA is the user-facing records. Just put it into the layman's terms. So whenever you're here, if you hear a practitioner, you hear a financial aid administrator start to use the word ISAR, it's the same thing. The same information is being passed over. One is just who's in possession of. So lastly, you must sign and submit the FAFSA form. There are a lot of times where students are going through the entire process, but they forget to hit submit. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it did. So you want to make sure they don't forget to hit submit. Okay. So once it goes off and they're able to view their submission summary, it's been a successful processing, and now they can expect to see, expect for the universities to receive their information. So that is going to be the first step before you make the transition to going to anything that we're talking about now. It has to be a successful FAFSA submission. Now, after they submit the FAFSA, they receive a submission summary. They can review all of the information they provided on the FAFSA form itself. They can also, schools will then take that information and then review it for any need-based aid, or they're going to review them for any institution aid the student may be eligible for. To calculate the need, and that's when you hear the terms need-based, what does that exactly mean? That means you take the cost of attendance and then you minus the SAI, which is the Student Aid Index, which is generated from the completion and submission of the FAFSA form. It takes all the information that was placed onto the FAFSA form and it produces an index number. That index number is subtracted from the cost of attendance. Now, if that number is in the positive, the student demonstrates need. If that number is in the negative, they do not demonstrate need. That's important because when you're either going down the process of special and unique circumstances or you're making adjustments and things like that, Being in the negative, going into the positive can generate opportunities for students to receive additional aid. That is also important because some scholarships and some other aid as well, when it's tied to their need, that's how it's being calculated. And that's what that you want that number to be greater in the positive than in the negative for the need. SAI can go low as negative 1,500. That's okay. But you want your need to be more in the positive than in the negative. Then a award letter is generated from the institution. Several schools have different practices when it comes to that. Some schools will give it to everybody that applies to the school. They'll generate an award letter as long as the student has indicated that institution on the FAFSA form, or they may wait till the student has been officially accepted. Different schools have different practices. So you want to find out what their practice is, and that will generate what their expectations and what timelines that you may be expecting from that institution in terms of receiving an award letter. What can hold up an award letter is that sometimes some institutions, when they're completing the Common App, students go in, they complete the Common App, then that application is sent to the various institutions that they indicated. However, you also want to check with the institution to make sure the social security number is coming along with that. Because if they don't have a social security number on file for the student at the institution, they cannot link the FAFSA form to the student, which means that can hold up the student being able to receive an offer or award letter. So they're like, hey, wait a minute, I completed the FAFSA form, I indicated the institution, I have not received anything. You might want to check with the institution to make sure that the social security number is active and correct on file. Also, after that, the student has an option to accept, decline, or appeal aid. If they feel like if it doesn't reflect their true financial status, they can always reach out to the financial aid office and let them know what is your practice, what is your requirements in regards to me submitting an appeal and being able to have you relook at my situation for additional information. And then lastly, once that's triggered, they go through the process of verification. We have to verify their statement. After we verifying their statement, then we'll conclude whether or not the SAI needs to be lowered or higher in some cases. So once that all occurs, before any aid is dispersed, that process has to be complete. And which means even if the student is going forward and they're enjoying themselves in school and they're excited, if they have not completed the process of verification, if they have not accepted their awards, those funds will not disperse, and there is a deadline to it. So, which means that the longer they wait to accept, the longer they wait to go through the process, once that deadline has expired, that money will be pulled back from pending status, and the student will owe that bill. Next slide, please. So now, when it comes to that student making the step into the FERPA, it is vital. It is extremely vital that students and families understand FERPA, the Educational Rights to Privacy Act. Every school has a process as it pertains. This allows parents to be able to receive information of the students' academic and financial records. It also allows the students that's being represented by the authorized representative to be able to access their information. The student has to provide that access. It is not automatic, which means that it may be a paper form or it may be also items as well for the student to complete within the registrar of student affairs. You have to check with that institution because it can make a very big difference when you're trying to help a student and the bill is right on top of them and they have to try to figure out what to do and you can't get access. You can't assist the student. The student needs to be able to give you or their parent access to that student's account to be able to help navigate those situations. Now, a couple of things as it relates to it. When you're calling up to the institution, they may have their own FERPA policy, which means that it may come with a code. It may come with just simply giving your name or your last four, your social, things like that. Check with the school, find out what is needed so the families can be able to navigate this situation. It is extremely important because when they're engaging this, as you all know, when they're engaging this in the 12th grade, a lot of things are coming very fast and bills are coming up on top of them. And so deadlines, some deadlines may be missed, and you don't want to be able to be in a position to be able to get the information that's needed and to make an informed decision as necessary. And a couple of things on the FERPA as well. Go to the next slide. Is that we have a scenario that we want to just also go through as it covers on FERPA. Keisha is a 19-year-old sophomore. Her mother, who pays a portion of tuition, calls the financial aid office. Yes, this happens quite a bit, and a lot of you probably experience this currently. She called the financial aid office to ask why did her Pell Grant was reduced with this year. The financial aid counselor begins to pull up Keisha's account, and the mother explains, I pay for her school. I have the right to know what's going on with her financial aid. Does that sound familiar to a lot of us? Absolutely. The counselor pauses, and the counselor's unsure how to respond. So we are very curious. How would you respond? And what do you think is the right way to address this situation? You could put it in the chat. And I'm curious to see which one would you say is the right response? Is it
I'm
A?
curious too, Isaiah. Go ahead.
Is it A? Continue on. Is it B? Go to lunch. Now, if somebody says go to lunch while we're having the conversation, you better bring me back some food. Now, C, verify the caller, or D, provide the information. Okay. Excellent, excellent. C is correct. Verify the caller. You have to make sure that that caller is an authorized person on the student's account. Okay. Great job on all of you. And shout out to Mary Ellen Glick, who also went into detail too. Your daughter will need to provide that authorization to share that information. So yes, extra kudos for her for pointing that out as well. So to continue on understanding that the student, you have to verify who that person is in order to provide that account, and it can get very frustrating for parents as their courses they're getting closer to paying this bill, and they just want to know what's the bottom line, but they can't access it without getting the authorization from the student. Next slide. And a couple different things as well. Written consent is important. Any changes to the student's account needs to be done in writing. So it's not just simply as calling up and adding somebody. No, it's not as simple as calling up and adding somebody. It needs to be done in writing. This is why the forms are very important. Any changes to students' accounts must be done in writing. So just expect to be able to write either a statement or even write an email. When it comes to changes, majority of items have to be done in writing, and the school will give you guidance on that. Next one.
Go, Isaiah. We're going to go into some special financial and unusual circumstances, navigating PJ and student support. I know a lot of you guys have heard these terms. We're going to go a little bit depth about them. But before we do that, I want to give you some rules and regulations that govern these circumstances. Again, those from the Higher Education Act or the FAFSA Simplification Act, or just basic professional judgment authority, dependency override authority, and some of the documentation flexibility that you may have as practitioners. And again, as Isaiah talked about, FERPA and confidentiality, very crucial and critical when dealing with sensitive information. But I've given here on the slide here the actual section on the HEA, the Higher Education Act, where FAAs have the authority to adjust the cost of attendance, as Isaiah mentioned earlier, or specific data elements or dependency status on a case-by-case scenario. And that's going to be done by the financial aid administrator exclusively and specifically. Under the Simplification Act, again, PJ or professional judgment has some flexibility. It's been expanded. And new provisions for unusual circumstances and dependency overrides. So that began back in 2024. And professional judgment, this is something, again, that financial aid administrators may adjust. Again, things like the SAI, the student aid index, or cost of attendance, or dependency status when documented circumstances are warranted. Each case individually documented. And this is all looked at on a case-by-case scenario. Again, the FAA can grant independent status for documented abuse or abandonment or homelessness or trafficking or such things as refugee status. Again, the FAA has the flexibility. And again, FAFSA simplification allows signed statements and alternative documents when standard documentation is unavailable. So you want to make sure that you're providing that information, or you're educating as practitioners, educating your students on how to properly document their situation or case. And here, again, on the slide is the authority that gives the FAA the leeway to make any actions or changes. Again, a prerequisite Completion of the FAFSA. Isaiah mentioned earlier the importance of submitting and define what a completed FAFSA looks like with all the consents and everything signed and submitted properly. Again, circumstances can only be evaluated after a valid FAFSA is on file. So that's key, that's critical, and must have a valid file, a FAFSA on file already. Again, why that's important? Because we need to establish what a baseline SAI looks like, and considering any things like verification, identity verification. Again, that also ensures the student is eligible for financial aid before consideration. And any automatic flags that may pop up, that'll notify the FAA if anything is required additionally, and also additional documentation, like any special circumstances that may require specific documentation. It must all be tied to a specific FAFSA. So if you haven't submitted a FAFSA for the updated current FAFSA year, you must do so if you want to be considered for this type of consideration. Understanding the two categories, special financial circumstances and unusual circumstances. And as you see here on the screen under special financial circumstances, these are just a general block of circumstances that we see most often in the financial aid office and that you may come across in your interaction with students and family. But special financial circumstances pertain to financial changes that impact your ability to pay for college. Such things as losses of income, or you lose your job, or your reduction in work hours, or medical expenses, divorce or separation, death of a parent, and so forth and so on. Anything that impacts the financial picture that you initially indicated on the FAFSA deserves to be looked at as a special financial circumstances. However, there's a such thing called unusual circumstances. And again, these are situations involving dependency or family breakdown, like abuse or neglect or abandonment of parenting or foster care, aging out, incarcerated parents, foster care, aging out, incarcerated parents, et cetera, et cetera. So distinction here is that one relates to the financial picture of the family, and the other one relates to situation involving dependency or family breakdown. So you want to make sure you understand the difference between the two when you're filing or submitting an appeal or particular consideration that you'd like the FAA to consider. We provided some information here on the screen about the most common special financial circumstances. Again, this is national data on professional judgment, the kind of requests, the types we get. As you see here, 38% basically come from requests that look like individuals maybe having some challenges with job loss or income reduction. And you see 24%, which is the next highest type of appeal, which relates to medical expenses. And then divorce and separation, death and parent or spouse, and also other circumstances around natural disasters and so forth and so on. So just a little overview of some national data that comes to us from NASFA, giving for where a survey they took, outlining what types of appeals or kind of breakdown come from the types of appeals that they commonly receive throughout the country. Acceptable documentation by circumstance type. I've indicated here the key document types. There's termination letters you can submit if it relates to your job, or layoff letters, or medical bills, again, divorce decrees. So these are the types of documents, recent pay stubs or death certificates. These are kinds of documents that are official documentation. It's not the end all for everything, but you need to be aware as a practitioner that these are the official types of documents that you need to advise your students that they need to gather up when they're making their specific requests of the school to consider them for circumstances or situations they may be in. So you can help them by helping them gather these documents so they can prepare their requests. Schools may accept alternative documentations when standard documents are unavailable. But again, keep in mind, these are sensitive documents and must be handled securely and confidentially. So practitioners, please, let's keep the confidence with the parent and the students. Do not share your information. But this is a guide that you can use to help guide the parent and student as they prepare their petition to be considered by the financial aid office. Professional judgment, or commonly known as PJ. and the financial aid appeal process. So let's go over a little bit about what that looks like. I know some of you all may have heard about what is the financial aid appeal process. I mentioned earlier there may be all kinds of circumstances that the student may experience, and they want an adjustment to be made to the financial aid package by the financial aid administrator. Your right to request a review of your aid or award or eligibility can be taken into consideration. Again, appeal is a formal written request. That's a formal written request, not just a verbal conversation on the telephone where you call the financial aid office and say, I got a situation, blah, 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 blah. That's not the way to handle that request. If you have this need, you need to submit a formal written request to the FAA asking them to reconsider your aid package based on some new information or changes in circumstances or documented error. Appeals are governed by the institutional. Each school has their own process, so please be aware of that. Feel free to go to the school's website. Each school has a financial aid page. You can look there to see what that school's particular process is and follow those steps accordingly. Again, you see on the screen some types of financial aid appeals. Again, professional judgment appeals are requests to adjust your cost of attendance or your student aid index or your income data has changed, as I mentioned earlier, or request to be treated as an independent student because you think your circumstances may warrant independent status versus a dependent status because of some abuse situation or homelessness or situations such as that. Or a satisfactory academic appeal may need to go in. So you want to request to restore your eligibility for aid after failing to meet GPA. Maybe you've gone to summer school, you made some changes, and that has been approved, and you want to request an appeal. So again, verification conflict, these are all things or all types of appeal. This is not the end all for everything, but this is pretty much common appeals that we see in the financial aid office. Keep in mind, only the FAA at the school can grant an appeal. So you have to go through their submission process first by submitting the written request and then wait for the FAA to respond accordingly. Again, no federal requirements to grant or appeal, so you can't appeal to the Department of Education or federal student aid complaining about why your appeal was or was not accepted. It's handled totally in-house at the institution. So you want to make sure you find out what their process is. And I mentioned earlier, all appeals must be written, and the supporting documentation must accompany that appeal request. And so each school has various deadlines. You want to make sure you ask the school if they have a specific deadline or timeline. And again, a denied appeal may be escalated to director or resubmitted. So again, once you understand that appeal process, make sure you're following each step accordingly. And appeals are not guaranteed. But again, you want to make sure you're following the correct steps so you can increase your chances of being accepted. So make sure you understand what the school requirements are. Steps to navigate the PJ appeal process. Here's a simple, practical roadmap for students and families and practitioners. 1, identify the circumstances and confirm it qualifies. 2, gather all the required documentations and submit completely, securely, and on time. You want to contact the financial aid office early. Call them or email the financial aid office and ask specifically, do you have a professional judgment or special circumstances process? So again, they may have some specific forms that they want or instructions or deadlines I mentioned earlier. But that information should also be found out on the website like I mentioned earlier. So you want to write a clear, compelling appeal letter, not anything long, not a dissertation, but a very specific, direct appeal that's clear so they can consider your information. And then follow up to know the next steps. Again, you can check back within the school, and the website should outline their process and how long you can anticipate the FAA appeal process to take. So you want to make sure you follow up with what their appeal process and timeline is. Here are some professional judgment review process, step-by-step workflow. And again, you as a practitioner can follow the review process. Again, the student initiates the request, and you can help them with their request. You can help them review their written submission to make sure it's properly written. You're going to submit that to the FAA. Any changes or intake conversations can begin. documentation collected. You, the practitioner, can work with the student to make sure they have all the correct supporting documentation before it goes into the FAA or the financial aid office, things like the termination letter or medical bills or page check stubs, those types of things to corroborate and support your request. So then that the financial aid office can review and validate the documentation. They can verify everything for consistency with the FAFSA data, and they can reach out to you and you can reach out to them for any further questions. And then the FAA can begin the process of considering a professional judgment. They can apply their resolution at that time once they have everything. And then lastly, the aid package can then be revised and they'll notify you, the FAA will notify you directly, you the student, of an updated award letter. And if that's been, your request has been approved and what the impact has been. And so they can follow with you and you can follow up with the school as well to see if any adjustments up or down have been made. Again, these are simple ways you can advocate as a practitioner to help them resolve cases. So again, you want to make sure you let the student know, do not simply call the school telephone number and begin a conversation about what your specific case may be. You want to make sure you read the website, find out what the process is, and then begin to initiate that process. And again, you can help them as a practitioner as well. Listen to what the situation is as a practitioner, and be sympathetic and to their concerns or their needs. Again, this is sometimes very sensitive information and process, and we want to make sure that the student gets a just due consideration when considering PJ. Again, make sure you are focused on hearing what the student's situation is. You listen without judgment. These are sometimes I mentioned earlier, some traumatic situations. So you want to make sure you're sensitive to that. Help identify the right category. You know, is it a financial situation or circumstance or an unusual circumstance? We talked about that earlier, and they both have different pathways that, in terms of documentation that you must take when you're pursuing either direction. Again, you can assist them with the documentation gathering and write a clear factual support letter, include who you are and how you know the student and what the circumstance it is when it occurred and the financial impact. And then follow up with the financial office. You can call them or email them to confirm receipt of the documentation. So don't wait. If you haven't heard anything after submitting your information past, say, 5 or 7 days, business days, take the initiation, the first step, and follow up the financial office and make sure they receive your request and all the supporting documentation that was needed. Here you see on the page, this is a sample appeal letter template regarding professional judgment or special circumstances. You can use it as a guide only. You see the format here, the date, and who you're addressing it to at the university. It's in regards to professional judgment appeal request. You can put the name and their school ID on it. And you can say here, dear financial aid administrator, I'm writing to request a review of my financial award under the institution's PJ process. Our family's financial circumstances has changed significantly since the prior year tax information used in my FAFSA. And then you can describe your situation there, whether it relates to joblessness or medical expenses, et cetera, and you let them know you've attached the following documentation. Let them know what the documentation is that you're attaching, and then you can end it. And I'm happy to provide any additional information if you need it. Thank you for time and consideration. Sincerely, the student's name, phone number, and email. Give them a method they can contact you back if they have further questions. So this is just a sample template that you as practitioners can use, and you can share with your students so they have a particular guideline that they can follow. Again, some sample appeal documentation, the checklist here. Again, this is organized by circumstance type, adapt to each institutional requirements. Each institution, again, may have their own documents that they require. They may have even a special form that they want you to use, the student to use when submitting their request. So you see here, here are some sample documents as relates to joblessness or income reduction or medical, dental expenses, divorce or separations, death, parent, or of a spouse or whatever, unusual circumstances, and incarcerated parents. So you see a list of some sample documents that you might want to submit with your request when you're submitting that to the institution. So you can keep that as a practitioner as a best practice document. Again, provide a cover page listing all the attached documents by name. This reduces the back and forth and speeds up the FAA review. So you'll make the process as easy and simplified as possible so the student can get positive resolution. Isaiah, why don't you give them information about scholarships? You want to take it over from here?
Absolutely. Thanks, Fred.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes to scholarships as well, as much what Fred has also indicated, paperwork is important. Understanding it, reading it, and knowing what the terms and conditions of that scholarship are. Now, the biggest thing about scholarships are knowing the amounts, knowing how long is that amount for. There's countless times students get so excited about receiving a big lump sum of a scholarship just to find out it's for just 1 year, or that $20,000 scholarship that thought they were going to receive is now spread over 4 years, making it 5,000 per year. And that can be making a big difference, especially at the public institutions where they have two different types of tuitions for residents and non-residents. And so it's important that students understand what the amount of their scholarship is going to be or is. And in fact, if they are not satisfied with the amount, or if they don't qualify, what is the appeal process at the institution, if there is any, to appeal that decision? And they wanted to make sure that they understand that the financial aid office at times may not be the individuals who are responsible for administering the scholarships for students. Very big to know that, because it can be the admissions office, it can be the school of the academic major, it could be another department. So knowing who administers the scholarship is very important when submitting or inquiring about this appeal. There are a couple of different things as it relates to scholarships as well, is how do you maintain that scholarship? Because just as much as when students are going through very difficult situations before they get into college, they can experience that while they're in college. And so when they're doing that and their GPA drops, or they did not complete the required number of credits for a semester, how can they make that up? And understanding that is very important. So are there off sessions, or can a student go to another institution to fulfill that 30 credit requirement for that scholarship, or that 24 credit requirement for that scholarship? And so they need to understand that part as they're navigating these complex situations or these special circumstances that they're experiencing. And when it comes down to if they lose it or if their income changes and things like that, it's very important to have a good relationship with the financial aid office, even if it comes to just being able to go to somebody and get your questions asked and answered in a timely manner. Sometimes it's better to call, sometimes it's better to go in person, sometimes it's better to email, but knowing the process and what best works for that institution is very, very important. Last thing on this slide too, we also have to note as they are getting more money in, their scholarships may be reduced. As they're getting more money in, their grants may be reduced. As from the year to year, that grant may change. Scholarships typically don't unless it's designated for 1 year. But what they want to make sure that they understand is that just because you get a scholarship, it still has to fit within the student's cost of attendance. That's the average of the tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, miscellaneous costs, etc. That is an average cost of going or attending that institution. Let's say, for example, if going to an institution is $40,000, that means the student cannot receive more than $40,000 in scholarships and grants and loans, etc. So that's vital to understand, because as students are wondering, how much money could I apply for? How much money should I go out there and get? Whatever that cost of attendance is for 1 year, this typically you should multiply that by 4.5. But you could only apply up to the full cost of tuition, I mean, attendance at that school for one academic year. Then students have to just sort of navigate that and understand that. But most importantly, follow the satisfactory academic progress that's designated by the school. It is very important to do that, to understand what those requirements are, but also to know that they not all the time will it be aligned with their scholarship, maintaining their scholarship. That could be 3.5. Meanwhile, to maintain the SAT, it's 2.0, right? So they're thinking that they did well at 2.0, at 2.1, at 2.5, but they lose that scholarship because they didn't maintain the required GPA. So it has to know what are the requirements in terms of conditions as they're navigating their circumstances as well. Next slide. So let's go through a scenario for Destiny. Destiny is a Philadelphia high school senior who receives a $20,000 scholarship letter congratulating her. She and her family celebrate, as they should, believing they have $20,000 toward college. Now, she later discovers that the scholarship is for $5,000 for 4 years per year, with GPA and enrollment requirements each year, and it will not be a $20,000 lump sum. She also learns her first year award was reduced because the scholarship counted toward her financial aid package. Now, here's a question for you all. What is the most important lesson for students and families when you're reviewing scholarship offers? Is it A, to know that scholarships always pay out in full at the start of the first year? Is it B, students should read all terms, disbursement schedule, renewal requirements, and how it affects other aid? C, a school is required to give the student additional grant aid to make up the difference. Or is it D, scholarship amounts listed in award letters are always guaranteed for 4 years? So, if no, I'm not Tom. My voice is not that good. So
Uh,
he has the voice for it.
you ready for
So,
the answer?
and the answer is B. Students should read all terms, disbursement schedule, renewal requirements, and how it affects other aids. And you notice we said students because remember, students are the account holder. While it is very great to have parents involved, students involved, authorized representative and college access professionals involved, the students should know their case, their circumstance, and everything as it pertains to them as well. Next slide. So we reached a point in this presentation that we're going to navigate several scenarios to sort of test your knowledge in real time. If you've been paying attention, if you've been following on along with us, these should be a breeze. If you just joined us, don't worry, we'll help you navigate these questions as well. So here's the first question for the first scenario. A student from Northeast Philadelphia submits the FAFSA using the prior year income. 2 months later, the student's parents lost their warehouse job near the airport. What should the financial aid office consider first? Should they tell the student to wait until next year's FAFSA? Should they review the family's current financial situation through professional judgment? Should they automatically increase federal aid without documentation? Or should they require the student to become independent?
Good
Give a little
question.
few seconds there, okay? Now, some of you experienced some of this in the fields, and now you're wondering which is actually the right thing, right approach that they consider. All right, I'm seeing a lot of B's in the chat. I don't know if that's standing for the Beehive or Beyonce. No, but you're right. The answer is B. The institution's financial aid office needs to review the family's current financial situation through professional judgment. Much like the information that Fred discussed early on, when understanding the documentation to submit, to verify, to vouch for that particular circumstance, that needs to be reflected in the documentation to reflect the current financial situation for parents. This is even more important now, considering we had mass layoffs across the nation. The appeals that we were seeing were increasing due to those layoffs. Families saying, yeah, I'm no longer working. I no longer have that same income. Can you reconsider? It's not reflective. So they have to look at the current situation, the current financial situation of the family to make a determination of what it can contribute towards college. And after they have reviewed the information and the documentation, then the family may have their SAI decreased, creating a greater need in the positive for grants and other scholarship relating to need-based awards. Fred?
Let's go to scenario B. West Philadelphia, medical expenses. Scenario. A family in West Philadelphia experienced major medical expenses after a parent's surgery. Insurance covers some costs, but the family still owes thousands of dollars. Which type of circumstance is the most likely considered? What type of circumstances is this most likely considered? A, unusual circumstances. B, verification conflict only. Or C, special financial circumstances. Or D, dependency override. Give you a couple of seconds. What do you think it is? Put your answer in the chat. What are you seeing most often in the chat, Isaiah? I see a lot of I see C's. I think a lot of people think it's related to special circumstances. Let's see what it
We have a
is.
comedian there in the group too. There, by the way, my man Siggers. He's got always putting humor to something.
Okay, well, if you answer C, you answered correct. Special financial circumstances. We talked earlier about that, and we showed you what type of medical, for example, medical documentation that may be needed to submit with your request for reconsideration to the financial aid office. So make sure you understand the difference between that special financial circumstance. Isaiah?
Sure, thanks. Thank you, Fred. A student states they left home due to emotional abuse and no longer have contact with their parents. What may the student be requesting? Is it A, loan consolidation? Is it B, a satisfactory academic progress appeal? C, dependency override review? D, verification worksheet? Very good question. I'm going to give you a couple seconds to review the question, answer it. Now, are they doing a loan consolidation, satisfactory academic progress appeal, which is also known as SAP appeal? Are they looking to change their dependency or pursue a verification worksheet? And the answer is
Mm.
dun dun C, dependency override review. It is the dependency override review because they're going from a dependent student to an independent student. In the case where you have an unsafe home environment, that is considered under unusual circumstances because the circumstances in their living arrangement is changing. So in this particular case, this student wants to make sure that they speak with the school, with you all, get a statement, make sure there's a statement on file and any other supportive documentation that's going to be attached to their statement. And then they're going to submit that to the institution. Now, institutions may require additional information or additional documentation. So you want to make sure that you also reached out to them as well to find out what that additional documentation may be. Fred?
That is correct. Thank you, Isaiah. Scenario number D. A student is temporarily staying with friends in North Philadelphia after being asked to leave home. That's unfortunate. Which office or professional could help support the student's homeless youth determination? Is it A, high school homeless liaison, or B, athletic coach only, or C, the campus bookstore, or D, federal loan servicer? And I've kind of already got ahead of myself and put the answer on the screen, so no one should get this wrong. The correct answer is a high school homeless liaison. Most high schools typically have a designated homeless liaison representative for the school system. You can go to that resource person and get them to understand your situation and get them to help you with any necessary documentation. So you want to make sure you check with your district's homeless liaison officer, and they can assist you with that type of request. Isaiah?
Thanks, Fred. A student was raised by their grandmother in Philadelphia, but there was never a formal custody agreement. What challenge may the financial aid office need to review? Is it A, a housing selection? Is it B, a meal plan eligibility? Is it C, dependency and parental information issues? Or D, library fines? Now, all of them may be are good answers, but there's only one right one. Okay, because this happens quite a bit, more so than people realize. where their parents are not in the student's life, and the grandmother, aunt, uncle, brothers are acting in place of the parental figure. So the answer is C, dependency and parental information issues. Here's where you're going to make sure that if a student is still in the school level, if a student or at the college, they want to make sure they reach out to the financial aid office at the college, or they want to make sure to reach out to the guidance counselor, or you all, if they're still in high school or they're meeting where they are. It's important that this document is situation and circumstance is supported. So supportive documentation will be very useful. Someone to, like, for example, a clergyman member, a pastor, someone also in a faith-based organization that can support the student's circumstance is going to be important here. So when contacting the institution, you have to let them know that the parents are not in the student's life, or there is something preventing the students from making contact with the parent. Discuss the overall situation to them, but also letting them know that there's no formal custody agreement on file, what documentation is needed or accepted by that institution to support the student's statement of that being raised by their grandmother in this case. So it's very important that if you can hear a trend, that when you get to sometimes these situations, the best way forward is to find out what documentation is going to be acceptable for that school, but to also note that if a student is looking to get an offer letter or award letter from multiple different institutions, not one process is going to satisfy all institutions. So each institution may have its own request. So one may
Yeah.
say, okay, all we need is a statement from the director of said department. Another it might say, okay, all we need is a statement from you. Another may say, okay, we need not just a statement, but I need you to go to get it from the principal. So you just have to be ready to be prepared to supply various types of documentation to different institutions if you're working with different institutions. Fred?
Mixed status family, immigration concerns. A student is eligible to complete the FAFSA, but the parents are nervous about providing information because of immigration concerns. What is the best response from the financial aid office? Is it A, tell the family they should not apply for aid? B, explain privacy protections and available FAFSA guidance? Or C, require citizenship documentation from the parents? Or maybe it's D, advise the student to wait until they turn 24. And again, going back to the scenario question, or scenario, I should say, a student is eligible to complete the FAFSA. Key phrase there. Which one is it? A, B, C, or D? What's your answer? Give you a few seconds. What's the best response from the financial aid office? A, B, C, or D? Everybody ready? Let's see what the answer is. The answer is B. Explain privacy protections and available FAFSA guidance. Again, you as practitioners, you're not making the resolution one way or the other. You are providing guidance. So you should have the guidance. Just simply explain privacy protections. Again, the student has information that's private to them, and the parent information is separate. No one has to get involved with the parent's personal background or status. So don't let that be a fear or a showstopper. Again, explain privacy protections and available FAFSA guidelines. So understand what the guidelines are for the student and when submitting the FAFSA application, and the consent information necessary from the parent. That may, in most cases, have nothing to do with the parent's immigration status. So you want to make sure that you understand. The student, it may impact because the student is the one requesting aid. So their immigration status is important. They must be U.S. citizens, but that doesn't necessarily fall upon the parents. Isaiah?
Sure. A 35-year-old Philadelphia resident lost their job and wants to return to school while supporting 2 children. How is this student most likely classified for FAFSA purposes? Are they A, a dependent student? Are they B, an independent student? Are they C, an international student? Or D, dual enrollment student? Drum roll, please. Yes, indeed. And the answer is B, independent student. And that is absolutely correct. Because remember, when they're completing the FAFSA form, the form will ask them for a series of dependency-related questions, some of which relate to age, which clearly at 35, that will qualify them as being an independent student, but also because they have two dependents, that would also qualify him as being an independent student. So first, shout out to the 35-year-old Philadelphia resident who decided to go back to school and while supporting two children, which is definitely not easy, an easy feat to do. So we wish them the best of luck.
Yep. A student works nearly full time to help pay rent and utilities for their household after a parent became ill. The question is, what should staff members avoid when discussing the student's situation? Is it A, explaining documentation requirements clearly? B, using trauma-informed communication? C, making assumptions or judgment comments? Or D, referring the student to support resources? Again, what should staff members avoid when discussing the student situation? A, B, C, or D? Give you a few seconds here. Let's look and see. What's the answer? The answer is C. They should avoid making assumptions or judgment comments. We talked about that earlier. You want to make this is sensitive information, and we want to make sure that the student is treated with respect and confidentiality, and not making any judgments or perceived notions about the situation at all. Just listen and be available to hear their situation. Isaiah?
Thanks, Fred. A student reports no contact with parents, but tax documents later show the student may be claimed by a parent. What should the financial aid office do? Should they A, ignore the conflict, B, immediately deny aid, C, review and resolve conflicting information before proceeding, or D, tell the student to submit another FAFSA form? Now, open book test. Which is the right answer?
Open book test. You ought to get this right.
Great job, everyone.
Oh, yeah, excellent.
No one
Everybody
failed.
got A's.
So, when it comes down to information that's conflicting, it's always important for the financial aid office to review all information. And when doing so, resolving what that conflicting information may be. There are cases where families don't have contact with the student, but they still claim them on their tax returns. And so the student will just need to support documentation verifying that they actually do not have connection or communication with that parent, although the parent is claiming them on the taxes. Now, I'm gonna put that on the flip first too. If a parent decides not, if is in communication with the student and the student already acknowledged that they're in communication with each other, the parent decides not to put the student on the tax returns, okay? Because they believe if they don't put them on the tax returns, that student will then be considered independent. That is not the case,
Wrong.
okay? The only thing that's missing here is that the parent is missing out on a child tax credit if they qualify. So it's important to understand that when financial aid offices are approaching this, they want to review the information, see what's conflicting, see if any adjustments are needed to be made, and then it will make a conclusion or a decision on the circumstance. Fred?
Okay. Let's see here. Hang on. Little technical issues here. Sorry. Okay. A student's academic performance and housing situation changed after experiencing community violence in their neighborhood. Again, question was left off of here, but let's see what it is. Should the student focus only on academic standing as a result of this violence? Should the practitioner refer the student to support resources while reviewing the situation compassionately? Or should they tell the student personal issues are unrelated to aid or automatically approve all requests? What should the FAA do? How should the practitioner provide guidance? But more importantly, what should the financial aid administrator do? Let's see what the answer is. Curious.
All right. We're getting B's in the chat.
B is right. Refer the student to support resources while reviewing their situation compassionately. Yeah, if you answered B, you answered correct. Very good. Very, very good. Very good. Isaiah, let's talk about SAP.
Absolutely. Thanks, Fred. When it comes to satisfactory academic progress, this is very, excuse me, very important for students to remember and to understand that this SAP process is set by the school. And it is pertaining to not just their academics, but also their ability to continuously receive financial aid, whether that's scholarships, whether that's grants, federal student educational loans, or other aid. When it comes to SAP, a student, if they would be placed onto provisional status or they placed into the waiting list, that doesn't mean that they lost their financial aid, but that means that they're trending to that direction. So when it comes to these processes, it's very important that students understand the SAP requirements as it pertains to the institution that they plan to attend. Now, different institutions, again, may have different requirements. They may have different breaking points where sometimes the students are able to have a 1.0 in their first semester. Other institutions are automatically dismissed. So you need to understand, a student needs to understand the SAT requirements, not just aligned with their grade point average, but it's also aligned with the number of credits they actually complete. There's a big difference between if a student is going in and registering for 4 credits or 4 classes, 12 credits, and not completing any of it or completing half of it. That falls below the threshold of the required enrollment for the student. And they can have, depending upon how they far along in there in that process, if they had at one point on a provisional status, if they received a warning, they can have their financial aid removed for up to 1 full academic year. So it's very important as they're navigating this special financial circumstance, as well as the change in their unusual circumstances, that they also understand the impact that it may have on their financial aid. It is extremely important. While if they're experiencing this, they just don't do this in a silo. They're talking to the financial aid office. They're talking to the academic affairs. They're talking to their academic advisor and other departments to make sure that if they do make decisions as to withdrawals, if they do make the decisions as pertains to the refunding back of their financial aid, that they have everybody involved to avoid going down the SAP process or committing having to submit a SAP appeal. Say SAP so many times. So you want to make sure that they understand this process. Every school has a process, and it's usually available on their website. So if you're unsure about what a school's process is, just go to their website. Most of the time, it's there. Now let's run through a scenario as it pertains to SAP. Marcus is a sophomore at the Community College of Philadelphia, majoring in business administration. During his first year, his family crisis caused him to withdraw from 2 courses mid-semester, and he failed a third. His cumulative GPA dropped to 1.7 and his completion rate fell below the 67% threshold. At the start of his second year, Marcus receives a letter stating his financial aid has been suspended due to the failure to meet SAP standards. He calls the financial aid office confused. He never heard of SAP before. Now, as a practitioner, what would you tell Marcus first? And what documentation would you ask, would you help him gather for his SAP appeal? Let's see if And you can just give sample responses in the chat. Things to consider. He had his SAP appeal. And let's look over what he's facing. GPA was dropped below 2.0. So he failed to uphold the GPA standard. The completion rate was at 50%. That went below the 67% threshold. Now his aid has been suspended. And when we say Title IV, federal aid is not available to him. Now he can't receive it until he either meets the standard of SAP, or he appeals the decision, the suspension decision, and is successful at doing so. Now keep this in mind, in the school policy, they're not required to reinstate aid without an approved appeal. Now, things that he can do is that, number one, following the SAP appeal, he needs to explain what happened. Whatever occurred, it needs to come with supportive documentation. It would also have to, we also talk to the financial aid office and to the SAP committee about an academic plan, right? How is he planning to meet it in the future? And then they will be provided with probationary aid, which basically means that, hey, this is provisional based upon your success to meet the standards in this semester, the next semester. And when he's doing so, putting together an academic plan, it's always advised that he does so with an advisor support, which will actually help him build a realistic academic recovery plan. It's not just about, especially when families are going through loss in parental figures, they're going through very serious situations, is the answer is not always, let me overwhelm myself in the following semester to get back on track. That's not realistic. Sometimes it needs to be small steps in the right direction. Fred?
Thank you very much, Isaiah. We wanted to give you guys, in case you didn't know, some resources and referrals in Philadelphia, community advocates and so forth that might be helpful for you in your work. Here you see some resources related to housing, financial or emergency situation, behavior health, college access. Of course, on the college access, you see Philadelphia College Prep Roundtable, Philadelphia Futures, College Advising Corps, FIA, Counseling Service, and so forth. Food and basic needs, agencies, organizations, and legal and immigration. So again, keep this list. You can copy it. You'll get a copy of the PowerPoint in case you come across some students who may be in need of some specific kinds of services. We wanted to provide you with some sample resources. Again, we thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's presentation. I want to go over a few takeaways, some key takeaways. Again, every student situation is unique. As practitioners, you need to remember that and not think that one size fits all, because it does not. It's very individualized, and each standard is reviewed separately. Professional judgment and the appeal process are powerful tools. Use them with intention. So know that you have these particular processes available to you, or the student that is, and you can give them guidance and direction accordingly. And again, after the FAFSA, students must understand that their SAR, previously SAR, was the student aid in the port. Sorry about that. Now it's been upgraded to the aid index, award letters, and their right to appeal. Isaiah mentioned a lot about scholarship, fine print matters, no disbursement terms, renewal requirements, and also any rules around that particular scholarship. We also talked about SAPs, satisfactory acting in progress, as well as FERPA, are not just policy that directly shape what aid students can access and who can discuss it. Compassionate, trauma-informed advocacy can determine whether a student stays enrolled or not. So you as a practitioner can have a positive impact or a negative impact on the student experience. Let's hope it's a positive impact. And again, we really thank you for the work that you do, and we know it's very valuable and important. And again, we want to thank you again today for participating. And at this time, we can turn it over to Candace for any questions or comments. Candace? Hope this has been helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen. As always, really good. But I see that we have a seasoned group in the audience, so they were not having any problems with those scenarios. But the information is always good, always relevant.
We hope it's
Um,
relevant and helpful. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's good. I think even though we have seasoned folks in the group, I really think the review is good just to put things top of
Yeah.
mind and
Yeah.
to reconsider. The minute you go back to work, next week, you'll have a student that falls into one of those scenarios. And so
Right.
this will be helpful. Um, I do want to go back to the chat or at least go back to a question and have you all address it. I lightly addressed it in the chat, but I think it's worth bringing up again. And it goes back to FERPA. And Sophia had a question about whether FERPA also applies to professionals and practitioners working with students. And so, can one of you address that?
Sure. So when it comes to working with a student, if you are within the university and you have a active reason to access the student's account, which basically your financial aid office, your registrar, your building, you are confined to this in the rules of the institution. And so you don't need the student to complete a form in order for you to perform activities of or the duties of your job at the institution. Now, if you're external to the institution, then you'll need to have the student provide access to their account, whether it's academic plans, financial plans, because you're external to the operations of the institution. And you don't have that the interest of the institution as they're performing the duties of processing the student's information. So it depends on what your role is and your relationship to the institution that would dictate that part of it. But if you're external, you will need to have the student complete a FERPA release and with your information on there so that you can get access to the student's records as they designate. And they can only designate you to see only the academics. They can only designate you to see their financials. It's entirely up to the student themselves.
Hmm.
Excellent. And then also there was the excuse me, a FERPA question. Sophia was just curious about at what point, does it apply to high school seniors, which I responded that, there's kind of a timeline.
Yeah.
And so, at what point does that FERPA start kicking in? Because it doesn't kick in right away, right? So families can have conversations with the financial aid office throughout the course of the year, but at what point does that FERPA start getting a little tight?
No, absolutely. So when it gets really tighter, the closer you get to the full application process. Now, anytime beforehand you're having a conversation with the institution and you're having general conversation, that's fine. But once the student starts to submit the application, that's when that clocks and that's when that starts to kick in because now comes down to the FAFSA information. FAFSA information, depending upon the student, can go, hey, we're listed on the FAFSA form, and that's all I need to do is be listed on the FAFSA form. If that's the institution practice to verifying for that family, that's all they may need. Some schools may say, okay, you submitted the FAFSA form, you submitted the application, but we have a separate process for all people, all
Yeah.
individuals
Yeah.
who are trying to access the student account, and they may have a separate process. So it really is based upon the institution and and how they approach it because they have to have a documented approach to make sure that they stay compliant with the FERPA rules and regulations. And so it could be simple. You're on a FAFSA form, we verify that, or it can be have a more complex process. It's really best that the student and the practitioner understands what institutions and what their practices are to help them navigate that situation.
Hmm.
Awesome. Okay, crowd, does anybody have any additional questions? Anything you want to bring up? I did, if possible, so everybody please make note. Oh, Tom said, I have asked about discretionary dollars each institution has behind their wall process. Tom, you
What
want
does
to
he
come
say?
off a mic?
Yeah, come on, Tom.
Well, I'm actually was addressing Teresa's question about she was asking about is there money if
Oh,
students don't
okay.
have enough money. So this is
Yeah.
outside the appeal process. Is there another thing? And I have, as an advocate, I have gone to financial aid offices and asked financial aid offices.
At
We reached
gunpoint?
we reached that point, yeah, where there's no more money you guys are saying out loud. If this student is a qualified student, and particularly I've done this with out-of-state students more so than Pennsylvania students.
Right,
I'm just
right,
saying,
right,
Pennsylvania
right,
schools are
right.
not going to do that, but the out-of-state, and then usually they have the schools I've been talking to. I'm not going to speak their names out loud, but the ones I've spoken to said we have a process. Student has to put in some paperwork. We'll look at it. We'll say whether or not we got some money behind or we got some money for them. So it is another almost a second layer internal process of applying for some additional dollars. But the students got to be like somebody they want.
Well, let me just say this though, Tom. Again, I will say, and it varies from institution to
Yes,
institution.
it
It's
does.
not the same for every institution. They have different pots, some big pots, some small pots, some mediocre, limited dollars, or or unlimited dollars. But it is proper and okay to begin the process by asking.
Yes,
The
that's it.
student can ask in writing. They need to establish a relationship with their financial aid administrator because things change throughout the year. Dollars change throughout the semester. What was available in August may not be available in December, or it may
Exactly.
be available it wasn't available in September or August when registration started, but it became available in November after Thanksgiving. I mean, some students drop out and their dollars are now available. Some donors may make a contribution to the institution that's now made dollars available to more students. So it varies. And some students, and I would recommend this in terms of scholarships. Most students, particularly incoming freshmen graduating from high school, primarily deal and talk to the admissions department exclusively. I would advise that they talk to them, yes, find out what they know, what they have available in terms of institution, but also talk to the various departments that you might be studying. You might be studying engineering, biology, or chemistry, or communications. Go to those departments directly and speak to the department chair and see and ask them directly, do you have additional dollars available? I'm interested in studying your department and I'm in need. They sometimes don't communicate with the admissions director office. So admissions may or may not know that the architecture department has dollars available from a donor who gave money. So the key takeaway is to, communicate. The early bird gets the worm. And you want to make sure that you are not shy. You're not waiting for everybody just to tell you because those dollars are often limited and they can't announce to the whole university, and those who inquire may be successful and get awarded if they have specific additional financial needs. So definitely inquire, talk to Tom, he'll advocate for you.
Yeah,
Can
stay
I
tuned,
add to
people,
that?
because we're not done yet. But I
Yeah.
want to highlight two things that Isaiah and Fred said about this. The appeal process request, right, as an advocate is different for a merit-based scholarship, right, and a financial aid package, right? There's two different offices that you're appealing to, number one, and the process is different. It is possible to appeal. My most successful appeals for merit have been when the student has not secured and declared that they're going to enroll at that school, and they've applied to a very like or peer institution, and you can say, hey, the other school gave me a little bit more money. They're kind of just like you, wink, wink, right? Those are more successful. But what Isaiah and Fred said is that it really is two different offices sometimes that you may have to appeal to. Naomi, do you have a
You're on
question?
mute, Naomi. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, not to be intrusive, but I just want to add on to the comments that the three of you made. Thank you very much. All of them are informative and helpful. I've worked inside and outside of the university system. And at one point, I was head of a foundation at a small community college. And what I found was that there are enormous pools of money. Someone mentioned something about the back money that no one ever sees. Well, not only do no one ever see them, no one ever hears about them. So I think there's a big gap in the learning process. I guess it goes back to financial literacy. Where is the money? In scholarships that each university, each college, each entity has as the institution's foundation.
Right.
As a student, most students have no idea there is such a thing as an institution, institutional foundation in the name of that particular college or entity, where all kinds of scholarships are available. And so my concern is, how do we get our students who are in dire need for more money to become more aware that they can ask, is there another pool there that I haven't looked at or that's not reflected in what you've given me? So a college normally would not go into their foundation to give you money unless you ask or unless you talk to someone who refers you to it. But if you don't know about it, that never happens.
Yeah, and that's
so
slippery. Because when
that's a
students
slippery
call and
slope.
ask for more money, they're told no, and then it kind of ends from there and they go to a different school, right? And
Exactly.
so,
When the reality is that there is money there, but it's not as Fred
That's what
mentioned,
it may be restricted
communication,
funds.
but it's
could be
also
restricted.
communication. There's not
Communication is critical.
communication between the foundation and the admissions office or financial aid, or I'd say financial aid office, so
Yeah.
that when that call comes in, that foundation is not in the head of that admissions person.
Right.
So
So
that's
it's not
the
something that's automatically provided unless
Right.
there's a unique circumstance that is
so
Right.
so Naomi, for me, that again, you're speaking to something that again falls clearly in the lap of the college access practitioner. That we have to be that helpful to be that translator of understanding, like you just said, that almost that scholarship literacy or that financial aid literacy that's out there, and give these like, okay, here's the stuff that here's stuff that the college is not going to tell you. It's not that they want to keep something away from you, but you have to be an informed consumer
Proactive.
to go look for and find those things. Now, I will say this, I find more and more these days that college foundations, scholarships and so forth are on their websites. They fall up under their scholarship page. If they're a strong financial aid institution, they will post those. But again, as I'm gonna go back what Fred said, every institution is not equally yoked in this thing, right? So some of them are not. Again, it's not. I'm not gonna put the blame on. And Lisa Ware, I shouted her out in here earlier about her can't do it because she is in the financial aid office. Um, I I think that again depends on what staffing, manpower. Sometimes you can't get that stuff up on the website because the website group is a whole nother group that's got other stuff that the president wants done, and it's all that, so a lot of this is the politics internally of the institution. So we as college access practitioners have to be able to say to our students we're servicing, look, here's another layer. Here's another rock we got to turn over that you may not be seeing it, but that's a turnover rock we got to deal with. But I do appreciate what you just said. Absolutely. And we have it for the record.
And I
Thank
want to
you.
add, I want to add to what you all have said too, about four different points. The first one is that when some of these scholarships are coming out of the admissions office, admissions deal with a high turnover. Institutional
Yeah.
knowledge isn't there, and so it's even more important for college access practitioners to sort of be the experts in that area because that's the most consistent of institutional knowledge. Even when we're looking at the financial aid office and the trend over the last 20 years, it has been less of a longevity in careers in financial aid offices. And now they're even becoming more specific, where someone would do reconciliation, one person would do loans, one person would do scholarships, and then that scholarship person would turn over, and that institutional knowledge goes out the window. Now, what we've also seen too is that with number two is that institutions that are major institutions end up having a database where they match active students and prospective students with scholarships. Problem is too, because when we talk about the scholarship literacy on the practitioner side or the financial aid side, it's not really there for students. And so when they're getting matched with different scholarships, they're thinking, oh, okay, how much work do I got to put in for this scholarship, and is it worth it, right? So then you're faced with that. And so that also harms the ability for them to receive the amount of money that would really help them because they don't see the value or in return of their efforts. And then you're battling that. The third thing is that when it comes to especially these funding, this it's very important that students, when they're going through this process, have the basic things done, right? So it's so many times, and throughout my career, I've engaged with students. I even help a student negotiate thousands of dollars in their increase. But the first part is have the basic things done. If you're interested in that school, okay, great. Did you complete an admissions application? Did you reach out to somebody? Or is it just a thought that you're saying to yourself, hey, I really like to the school. I want to see what they have to give to me, but you haven't did any of the legwork to put yourself in position to have that conversation. Because a lot of them would say, well, how many times that we have all come across someone who says, okay, were you accepted into the institution? Did you at least apply to the institution? You applied, but did you submit your transcripts? Do the basic work to get
Last
yourself
week,
in
Isaiah,
position.
last week.
Last
That's how recent.
so it's
I'm
it's
going to
that
college.
Mm.
it's
I
that
just
it's that
decided.
level.
Okay.
And then the last
Mhm.
thing is most importantly is even when we talk about these dollars, they're so deadline driven that it's incredible. And students will miss out on deadlines and miss out on thousands, if not millions of dollars because while we're talking about the pool of money, it is also a pool of money that is precious to the institution. And they're not just going to say give it out to everybody. It's so important for the students to adhere to those deadlines and to take those consider, but also we need also as college access professionals, as higher education professionals, the communication side has gotten a little bit with a gap into it because we're also speaking on college level where the parents and students are in terms of financial aid are at a lower reading level. We're tossing around terms and terminologies that they have no idea about. We're engaging them in a process that they have no idea about. And so everything is coming at them at once. And to your point, Miss Nelson, it's so difficult to include scholarship available information in that when everything is being hit to them all at once. And we find across the nation, the ones who are better, who are more receptive and more prepared are those who are starting a lot earlier and have the room and mental capacity to accept the next steps or to access points for that scholarship and to have those discussions because they have the time to have that 2 week, 3 week, 4 week conversation because it's not going to be instantaneous. It's going to take over a series of weeks and if not months. They have more space and more capacity for that, but not for students that are just coming in on a 12th grade year and have to make a decision.
Well, I have to thank you guys again because, as usual, the after party discussion is even is even as good as the presentation. So thank you for all the extra. Okay, Lisa just put her hand up. What I do want to say is, oh, Lisa, did you have a question?
I just had a comment. One, thank you for the presentation, but I just also wanted to add, it's also the students have to be motivated. I know when I meet with student and parents and we're talking about scholarships, and I also tell them to, appeal when there's an appeal process, when I hear something, but I also tell them to reach for outside scholarships, especially those that are not essay driven, but I'm finding students prior to entering and once they are, they're not motivated to continue. If there's a monthly sweepstakes, and I tell them, set up a dummy email, ignore the advertisement, but keep applying for the sweepstakes because it will eventually benefit at some point but they do it one time and just say, oh, I'm not doing it again. So you got to keep motivating them to keep applying.
Yeah. Yeah. Different
Yeah.
generation, new
And be
generation.
careful of the ones that are scams.
Yeah.
All those sweepstakes are not created equal. I agree.
Yo, it's Philly College Prep.